The hydraulic wrench slipped from Jake Morrison's grease-stained hands and clattered against the metal floor of his repair bay. He cursed under his breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. It was past midnight on Rust Harbor Station, and he was the only fool still working in the industrial sector. The pay was terrible, but fixing broken cargo haulers kept him fed and off the radar. That was when he heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the disposal area. Jake grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the pile of damaged cargo containers waiting to be jettisoned into space. The scratching came again, weaker this time. He swept his light across the twisted metal until it landed on a small container marked with yellow hazard tape. The container had a crack along one side. Something moved inside. Jake hesitated. Smart people on Rust Harbor minded their own business. The station existed in the gray zone between legal and lawless, where smugglers and criminals came to trade goods no government would touch. Whatever was in that container was probably dangerous, illegal, or both. The scratching sound came again, desperate and fading. Jake set down his flashlight and pried open the container with a crowbar. The metal groaned as it bent. Inside, curled among shredded packing material and dried blood, was a small creature that looked like a cat. But Jake had seen plenty of Earth cats, and this was not one of them. The creature had pale blue fur matted with filth and darker patches that might have been bruises. Its large eyes were closed, and its breathing came in shallow gasps. 4 legs, a tail, pointed ears. It was about the size of a house cat, but its proportions seemed wrong somehow. Too muscular in some places, too thin in others. Strange markings ran along its sides like faded tattoos. Jake reached out slowly. The creature's eyes snapped open, revealing bright amber irises with vertical slits. It tried to hiss at him but only managed a weak wheeze. Too weak to run. Too hurt to fight. "Easy there, little guy," Jake whispered. He had no idea if it understood him, but his tone seemed to calm it slightly. "I'm not gonna hurt you." He pulled off his work jacket and carefully wrapped it around the creature. It barely struggled as he lifted it. The thing was light, far too light. Jake could feel its ribs through the matted fur. How long had it been trapped in that container without food or water? Jake's quarters were 3 levels up. He took the cargo lift instead of the main corridors where station security might see him. His room was small and cluttered with spare parts and half-finished projects. He cleared off his workbench and laid the creature down gently on a clean rag. The station's AI chimed a warning. "Unregistered biological entity detected. Please report to medical quarantine immediately." Override. Personal pet. Registration pending, Jake lied smoothly. Warning, unknown xenobiology may pose health risks. Noted. Now shut up and let me work. Jake had basic medical supplies from his time in the service. He cleaned the creature's wounds with antiseptic and gave it water through a dropper. It drank weakly at first, then more eagerly. When he offered it a piece of dried meat from his rations, it sniffed carefully before eating. As Jake worked, he noticed something odd. On the creature's left ear, barely visible under the matted fur, was a series of symbols burned into the skin. Not natural markings. A serial number. This creature had been property. Someone's experiment or cargo or weapon. The creature's breathing steadied as Jake finished bandaging a deep cut on its shoulder. Its amber eyes watched him with an intelligence that made Jake uncomfortable. Those were not the eyes of a simple animal. "What are you?" Jake whispered. "And what did they do to you?" The creature closed its eyes and slept. Jake sat back and stared at it, already knowing he had made a choice that would change everything. He should report this. Turn it over to station authorities. Collect whatever reward might be posted. Instead, he pulled a blanket over the sleeping creature and whispered, "Guess you're mine now, Runt." 2 weeks passed like a strange dream. Jake kept Runt hidden in his quarters, telling curious neighbors he was working on a classified repair project. Most people on Rust Harbor knew better than to ask questions. Runt recovered faster than Jake expected. The wounds healed and the creature gained weight. Its fur became soft and clean, revealing intricate patterns of silver stripes against the pale blue. But the most surprising change was behavioral. Runt was smart. Very smart. On the 3rd day, Jake left a simple puzzle box on the floor with treats inside. When he returned from work, the box was open and empty. Runt sat nearby, licking its paws with an expression that looked almost smug. Jake started leaving more complex puzzles. Runt solved them all. By the end of the first week, Runt understood basic commands. Sit, stay, come. But it was more than obedience. The creature watched everything Jake did with focused attention, as if studying him. When Jake worked on machinery, Runt would sit on the workbench and observe, its head tilting at different angles. One evening, Jake was struggling to reach a bolt deep inside an engine casing. His fingers were too large for the narrow space. Runt jumped down from its perch, walked over to the toolbox, and carefully picked up a small magnetic retriever in its mouth. It brought the tool to Jake and dropped it at his feet. Jake stared at the creature. "You understood what I needed." Runt made a soft chirping sound and sat down, waiting. From that moment, everything changed. Runt became Jake's assistant in the repair bay. The creature could squeeze into tight spaces, retrieve dropped tools, and even hold pieces in place while Jake welded. Other mechanics started noticing Jake's improved efficiency, but he always worked late when fewer people were around. They developed a communication system. One chirp meant yes. Two chirps meant no. Different tail positions indicated emotions. Runt could not speak, but it found ways to make itself understood. Jake started researching through the station's black market data network. He paid a shady information broker named Vex 200 credits for xenobiology files. What he learned made his blood run cold. Runt was a feliner, a species known across the galaxy as fierce warriors and hunters. Adult feliners stood 7 to 8 feet tall with muscles like steel cables. They served as mercenaries, guards, and soldiers. Their reputation for combat prowess was legendary. Jake looked at the tiny creature sleeping on his pillow. Runt was barely 2 feet long. Something was very wrong. He paid Vex another 500 credits for medical scanning equipment. The results confirmed his suspicions. Runt had severe genetic dwarfism. Its body structure matched feliner biology, but its growth had been stunted at the genetic level. While other feliner grew into massive predators, Runt had remained small and weak by their standards. Jake sat on his bunk and scratched Runt behind the ears. The creature purred, a sound like distant thunder. "They threw you away because you were different," Jake whispered. "I know how that feels." Jake had been thrown away too. Dishonorably discharged from the military after refusing an illegal order. Exiled to the edges of human space where nobody cared about his name or past. He and Runt were the same. Broken. Discarded. Unwanted. 3 months into their partnership, Vex appeared at Jake's door with a worried expression. "We need to talk. Someone's asking questions about stolen property. Describe something that sounds a lot like your little friend." Jake's hand instinctively moved to the plasma cutter on his belt. What kind of someone? The dangerous kind. Corporate types with military escorts. They're offering 50,000 credits for information leading to recovery of experimental property. 50,000 credits. Enough to buy a ship and leave the station forever. Enough to start a real life somewhere clean and safe. Jake looked at Runt, who was organizing tools on the workbench by size. The creature glanced up at him with those intelligent amber eyes and made a questioning chirp. "Tell them you found nothing," Jake said to Vex. "And if anyone else asks, you never saw me." Vex nodded slowly. "You're making powerful enemies, Morrison. Won't be the first time." The feliner diplomatic ship arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. Jake saw it docking through the viewport of his repair bay and felt his stomach drop. The vessel was massive, gleaming black metal with red insignia painted along its hull. This was not a merchant ship. This was military. Runt sensed Jake's tension immediately. The small creature stopped working and looked up at him with worried eyes. Jake forced a smile. "It's okay, buddy. Just keep your head down today." But it was not okay. By afternoon, station security had posted notices. All residents were required to report any sightings of unusual alien fauna. A feliner ambassador named Commander Thraxus was conducting an official investigation. Failure to cooperate would result in detention. Jake locked his quarters and told Runt to hide in the ventilation shaft he had modified for emergencies. "Stay quiet. Don't come out until I get back." Runt chirped twice. No. The creature did not want Jake to leave. "I have to. If I don't show up for questioning, they'll come looking." Jake scratched behind Runt's ears one last time. "Trust me." The interrogation room was cold and sterile. Commander Thraxus stood over 7 feet tall with dark gray fur and scars across his face. His eyes were the same amber color as Runt's, but filled with cold calculation instead of warmth. "Mr. Morrison," Thraxus said in perfect English, "you work in the disposal sector. Have you encountered any unusual cargo in the past 4 months?" Jake kept his expression neutral. "I see unusual cargo every day. You'll have to be more specific." Thraxus placed a data pad on the table. It showed an image of a feliner kit, small and young with pale blue fur. "We are searching for a member of the royal family who was lost during transport. This individual is extremely valuable to us." Jake's heart pounded. Royal family. Runt was royalty. Haven't seen anything like that, Jake lied. Why would a royal be on a garbage transport? Thraxis's expression darkened. That is not your concern. The individual in question suffers from a genetic defect. Dwarfism. It is a great shame to our people. He leaned forward. If this defective specimen is found, it must be returned immediately. We cannot allow knowledge of such an embarrassment to spread beyond our borders. The way Thraxis said defective specimen made Jake's blood boil. He forced himself to stay calm. If I see anything, I'll report it. Thraxis studied him for a long moment. You are lying, Mr. Morrison. I can smell deception. But I will give you one chance to reconsider. He pushed a credit chip across the table. 100,000 credits. Simply tell me where the specimen is located. Jake stared at the chip. That was enough money to disappear completely. Start over somewhere far away. I have nothing to tell you, Jake said. Thraxis picked up the credit chip slowly. Then you have 24 hours to change your mind. After that, this entire station will be declared hostile for harboring stolen Feliner property. Every ship will be searched. Every resident interrogated. Many will die. He smiled without warmth. Think carefully about how much one defective animal is worth to you. Jake returned to his quarters shaking with anger and fear. Runt emerged from the ventilation shaft immediately, sensing distress. The creature rubbed against Jake's legs, making worried sounds. Jake sat on the floor and pulled Runt into his lap. I need to tell you something. Your real name is Kael'thor. You're a prince. But your family doesn't want you back because you're small. They think you're broken. Runt stared at him. For a moment nothing happened. Then the creature's eyes went distant and unfocused. It made a sound Jake had never heard before, something between a whimper and a cry. Memories were returning. Fragments of a life before the container. Palace halls. Voices filled with disgust. Betrayal. Jake held Runt tighter. They're wrong. You're not broken. You're the smartest, bravest thing I've ever met. Runt trembled against him, processing the horrible truth. Its own family had thrown it away like garbage. Jake made a decision. We're leaving. Tonight. And they'll have to kill me before I let them take you. Jake worked through the night packing essentials into a single duffel bag. Food, medical supplies, credit chips, fake identification documents he had bought years ago for emergencies. His modified freighter was docked 3 levels down. If they moved fast, they could launch before Thraxis locked down the station. Runt sat on the workbench, unusually still. The creature had been quiet since learning the truth about its identity. Jake worried the revelation had broken something inside the small Feliner. Hey, Jake said softly. Talk to me, buddy. One chirp if you're okay. Runt looked at him with those amber eyes. No chirp came. Instead, the creature made a gesture with its paw, pointing at Jake's data pad. Jake handed it over. Runt's small claws moved across the screen with surprising precision. It pulled up the black market database and started searching. Jake watched in amazement as Runt navigated through layers of encrypted files, moving faster than any hacker Jake had seen. How are you doing that? Jake whispered. Runt ignored him, focused entirely on the screen. After 10 minutes, it stopped and turned the pad toward Jake. On the screen was an ancient Feliner text, translated into English. The title read, The Sight Bearers, Lost Legends of the Small Ones. Jake read quickly. According to the document, small-statured Feliner appeared once every 1,000 years. They were not defects. They were evolutionary adaptations. While warrior Feliner relied on strength and size, the small ones possessed different gifts. Enhanced problem-solving abilities, technological intuition, and something called the sight, a form of precognition that allowed them to see moments into the future. These small Feliner had been the greatest leaders, inventors, and strategists in ancient history. But 5,000 years ago, the warrior caste had seized power and suppressed all knowledge of the sight bearers. They could not allow anyone to know that the defective ones were actually superior in ways that mattered more than physical combat. Jake stared at Runt. You're not broken. You're legendary. Before Runt could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed. A voice crackled over the intercom. All personnel evacuate Sector 7 immediately. Feliner security forces are conducting a mandatory search. They're coming. Jake grabbed his bag and scooped up Runt. We need to move now. They ran through the corridors toward the docking bay. Jake's heart pounded as they rounded each corner. Twice they heard Feliner soldiers in adjacent hallways and had to backtrack. Runt made small chirping sounds, and each time Jake followed the creature's signals, they avoided patrols. Runt was guiding them. seeing seconds ahead, knowing which paths were safe. They reached the docking bay to find two Feliner guards standing in front of Jake's ship. Jake cursed and ducked behind a cargo container. No way past them without a fight he could not win. Runt squirmed out of Jake's arms and jumped to the floor. Before Jake could stop it, the small creature ran toward the guards. Runt, no. Jake hissed. But Runt moved with purpose. It darted between cargo containers, leading the guards on a chase away from the ship. Jake watched in horror as the guards pursued, their weapons drawn. Then he understood. Runt was creating a distraction. Jake sprinted to his ship and fired up the engines. The guards heard the noise and turned back, but Jake was already at the controls. He opened the rear cargo door. Runt. Now. The small Feliner burst from behind a container and ran at full speed. The guards fired energy weapons, bolts of plasma scorching the deck where Runt had been a split second before. But the creature dodged each shot as if it knew exactly where they would hit before the guards pulled their triggers. Runt leaped through the cargo door just as Jake slammed it shut. The ship lifted off as guards pounded on the hull. Jake pushed the engines to maximum and rocketed out of the docking bay into open space. As they cleared the station, Runt jumped onto Jake's lap and accessed the ship's communication array. With quick movements, it transmitted the ancient text about site-bearers to every Feliner frequency it could find. The truth was broadcasting across the Empire. "What did you just do?" Jake asked. Runt looked up at him and chirped once. Yes, it was time for everyone to know. 6 months passed like a storm across the galaxy. Jake and Runt moved through neutral space, never staying anywhere long. They heard the news through every channel. The Feliner Empire was tearing itself apart. Runt's broadcast had reached millions. Young Feliner who had been killed at birth for being too small. Families who had hidden their defective children in shame. Scientists who had suspected the truth but were too afraid to speak. They all rose up demanding answers. The warrior caste tried to suppress the rebellion, but the evidence was everywhere. Ancient texts. Hidden records. Genetic studies that proved the small ones were not mutations but natural evolution. Jake's ship became a refuge. They rescued 17 small Feliner from execution facilities and research labs. Each one showed the same gifts Runt possessed. Intelligence. Technical skill. The sight. Together they formed a small fleet of stolen ships and sympathetic allies. The bounty on Jake and Runt grew to 5 million credits. But so did their legend. People called Runt, the Little Prince. They called Jake, the human who started a revolution. Then the message came. A reformist faction within the Feliner government begged Runt to return home. To claim the throne. To lead their people into a new age. Without Runt as a symbol, the rebellion would fail and the warrior caste would crush all opposition. Jake sat in the pilot's chair staring at the message. "It's your choice, buddy. We can keep running or we can go back." Runt had grown in confidence over the months. The creature now wore a small communication collar that translated its thoughts into speech through neural interface. "If I do not go back, they will kill everyone who believed in me," Runt's synthesized voice said. "I cannot let that happen." "You know it's probably a trap," Jake warned. "I know." Runt's amber eyes met his. "But I also know you will be there with me." They returned to the Feliner homeworld with an escort of 30 ships. The planet was beautiful from orbit, covered in red forests and silver oceans. But Jake could see the scars of civil war. Burned cities. Damaged orbital stations. A civilization eating itself. The palace stood at the center of the capital, a massive structure of black stone. Thousands of Feliner gathered outside the gates. Protesters and supporters. Soldiers and citizens. When Jake's ship landed, the crowd went silent. Runt walked down the loading ramp with Jake beside him. The small Feliner looked tiny compared to the 7-foot warriors surrounding them. Commander Thraxus stood at the palace entrance with royal guards. "You should have stayed hidden, little prince," Thraxus growled. "Now you will die in front of your followers and end this foolish rebellion." Runt walked forward calmly. "I challenge the legitimacy of your rule. The warrior caste has hidden the truth and murdered thousands. You are not fit to lead." Thraxus laughed. "You? A defective Runt? What can you possibly do?" Runt's eyes glowed faintly. The sight activated. "I can show them what you cannot see." The small Feliner accessed the palace computer systems through a neural link. Holographic displays appeared in the air above the crowd. Financial records showing corruption. Communications revealing massacres of small Feliner. Video evidence of the warrior caste destroying ancient libraries. Every crime exposed in seconds. The crowd roared in anger. Royal guards looked at each other in confusion. Some lowered their weapons. But Thraxus was not finished. He lunged at Runt with claws extended. Jake moved to intercept, but he was too slow. Thraxus would reach Runt first. Then Runt simply stepped aside. The sight showed exactly where Thraxus would strike. The commander crashed into the ground, missing completely. Again he attacked. Again Runt moved at the last possible moment. The small feliner made the mighty warrior look clumsy and slow. The crowd began to cheer. They saw what Jake had known for months. Size did not matter. Strength was not everything. Intelligence and perception were greater weapons than claws. Thraxus collapsed, exhausted and humiliated. How? He gasped. Because I see the future, Runt said simply. And the future does not belong to warriors like you. The coronation happened 3 weeks later. Runt was crowned, but immediately established a constitutional government limiting royal power. The first law abolished the killing of small feliner. The second opened all historical archives to the public. Jake stood in the palace garden watching the ceremony on a view screen. Runt appeared beside him, now wearing simple robes instead of heavy royal armor. You could stay, Runt said. Be my advisor. Help me rebuild. Jake smiled and scratched behind Runt's ears one last time. You don't need me anymore, buddy. You've got a whole empire to fix. I'm just a mechanic. You are the person who saved my life when no one else would. You saved mine first, Jake replied. You gave me a reason to care again. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two outcasts who had changed the galaxy. Then Jake picked up his bag and walked toward his ship. As he lifted off, Jake looked down at the planet below. Hundreds of small feliner were emerging from hiding, walking freely in the streets for the first time. Children who would have been killed were now celebrated. An entire civilization transformed because one human decided to show compassion to a dying creature in a trash container. Jake smiled and set course for the stars. There were other people out there who needed help. Other outcasts waiting to be found. His communicator chimed. A message from Runt. The genetic research facility has been shut down. 400 prisoners freed. Multiple species. Thank you, Jake. For everything. Jake typed a simple response. Anytime, little prince. Anytime. He engaged the hyperdrive and disappeared into the vastness of space, ready for whatever came next.